One of the things about big beef rib, you see that big bone. Sometimes it's kind of sharp on the edges. So when you wrap, make sure you don't squeeze too tight on your foil. You might tear a hole in the foil. And I'm sorry guys, but I mean, this is just something I always have to do. Before I wrap something this big and this pretty, I just gotta take a little taste. Just kind of want to see where I'm at. I call it quality control. Sometimes it's so good, I gotta get a second piece. Hasty-Bake puts a nice, pretty smoke ring. Look at that pretty moisture. Look at all that delicious juice running out of there. Amazing. Big monster ribs, man. That's the way to go. This video we're calling Beef Fest because I love beef rib. We're gonna go see my good friend Marco Aguilar at Aguilar Meat Market in Edinburgh, Texas. Let's check it out. Hey, good morning barbecue lovers. We're in Edinburgh, Texas at Aguilar Meat Market. We're gonna meet up with Marco Aguilar here. He's gonna explain to us a little bit about the beef ribs, where they come from, what are the different types and where they're cut from. And then we're gonna go home and cook them and enjoy them and show you how to do it. Marco, what's going on, brother?
How's it going, Arnie? Pretty good, man.
We're gonna talk about beef ribs today. Marco, why don't you tell us a little bit about the beef ribs, where they come from, which cut is what. So break them down for us. Tell us where they come from.
Today we have an export rib, which is your bone and ribeye. Under it is your back rib, finger rib. We got your 4-bone chuck short rib. It's your monster rib, your 1, 2, 3 loaded rib. You got your loaded rib ready cut. Your top short rib cut as well. The chuck short rib cut. And then we also have our navel plate, which produces your brisket end. A lot of people call the English rib the 3-bone rib, but to me the English rib is the chuck short rib, the 4-bone rib. And the chuck short rib comes actually under the shoulder and right above the chuck. And the reason I call it the English rib.
So this would be the chuck end on this side?
Yeah, this is the chuck end, right? And the reason I call it the English rib is because there's actually an English steak that goes part of the shoulder clot and with the English rib. And that 4-bone is what comes on that English steak. So this is the 4-bone chuck short rib, and this is actually the whole one of the chuck short rib also. A lot of people say that this is the dinosaur rib. To me, the dinosaur rib is actually the 1, 2, 3A, because the 1, 2, 3A is a lot thicker, as you can see, than the chuck short rib is. The 1, 2, 3A comes a little bit further down on the carcass.
When you say down, you mean lower in the animal?
Yeah, lower, towards the further down the breastplate.
Okay.
And so it's you start with the shoulder, then you get to the actual primal, the prime rib. Below the prime rib becomes your 1, 2, 3A loaded rib. There's also what's called the 1, 2, 3B. The 1, 2, 3B just means that extra rib's still on there, the 4th bone. The 1, 2, 3A produces your loaded ribs, which a lot of people call this the English rib. And like I said, it has a lot more meat on it than the chuck short rib does. And it also produces your top short rib.
So that would be the short rib?
Yeah, this is the short rib.
So the short rib actually comes from the big 3-bone?
Yeah, what they like to call the short rib is, they'll call them either flanking ribs or short ribs. Short ribs are when you cut with the bone. Flanking ribs are when you cut across the bone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's one of my favorite ribs ever is the short rib, but I always thought it came from the 4-bone, but see, even I learned something today. It actually comes from the 3-bone, big rib.
Yeah.
This is what most of your barbecue restaurants cook and call the monster rib, right?
Yeah.
The dinosaur or monster rib, yes.
Yeah, so this is what most of them use. It's thicker, and a lot of people will say, no, well, I got dinosaur ribs, but they were real thin, or they weren't real thick, or, well, a lot of people are getting the chuck short rib as a dinosaur, which is the 4-bone. You gotta ask for the 3-bone.
You gotta ask for the 3-bone, okay.
It also depends on the size of the cattle. If you have, beef further down from South Texas, it's good beef, but the cattle's smaller. If you get beef from, I believe this one's from Nebraska, if I'm right. If you get beef from Nebraska, Iowa, larger beef, then it gets a lot thicker. If
we were comparing a hog to a steer or a cow, which one of these ribs would be considered the baby back, and which one would be considered the spare rib? Okay.
So on a hog, the pork loin is going to run all the way from your chuck end to the end of your sirloin, which is it's a real long piece of rib. Okay. When you get to the middle of your baby back, right before you hit the tenderloin, which would end up being like your T-bone steaks, the back of it would be this part, and that would actually be your baby back.
So the finger rib would actually be the...
It's comparable to a baby back. The only difference is that a baby back, finger rib's only seven bones. A baby back's actually 14 bones.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you look at a baby back and a spare rib, if you ever have a chance to put them together, you put them side by side, and you can see where the spare rib starts and the baby back. and it lines up completely. And spare rib's also 14 bones.
Okay.
Baby back's also 14 bones. So that's where exactly where they hit. So your spare rib would be basically kind of your dinosaur ribs and down here, and then your navel plate would be where the St. Louis ends and that breastbone on the spare rib begins. So that's why a lot of people can say that you can actually take a navel plate off of a carcass just with a knife, because it's just cartilage, the way you can separate a St. Louis rib between a spare rib to break that breastbone. So this navel plate is actually like the breastbone of the spare rib itself.
Okay. Interesting, very interesting. So now we know why finger ribs are my favorite, because they're actually considered or comparable to a baby back on a hog. Now I know why I like them so much, because they're just full of flavor. I just wish they had more meat. Maybe if we paid the right price, you'd cut this in half and leave the meat on the bone.
Like a butterfly.
All right, Marco, we're going to wrap this up. I got to ask you this question. If you personally, being a meat market guy, what is your favorite rib to eat? Beef rib.
That 1-2-3 rib, the one that you call the monster rib. Yeah. That's my favorite one. But I like to cook it whole. And the way I like to do it also is, and you can ask any butcher to do this as long as they have a saw in the plant. I like to break the bone, to just break it the way the top short rib's kind of broken. Okay. Yeah. So you break the bone, and then you cook it whole. So that way the meat's still intact and it stays juicy. But at the same time, when you're ready to serve, you're not going to get monster ribs for even the kids or something like that. You're going to get 6 individual ribs. Or you can even break it into thirds as well and get 9 individual ribs.
All right, that's going to wrap up the rib section. Marco, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, bro. Had a good time, and thank you for having us and explaining all this stuff. We dispelled some of the mystery of where the beef ribs come from. If today's Beef Fest, that makes me your beef chief. And as your beef chief today, we're going to be looking at, discussing, cooking, tasting, and enjoying several types of beef ribs today. All right, before we get totally into the beef ribs, just wanted to kind of point out, Texas is a pretty big state. There are different regions, and one of the things with meat markets and butchers sometimes, depending on where you're at, you know, an English rib may be a 4-bone rib, and it may be a 3-bone rib, a short rib. May not be called a short rib in your area where it is in mine. They may have different cuts. They may be called different names for the same cut. The most important thing is to cook the ribs that you like the best, regardless of what the cut is called. Cook it the way you want to do it till you get it the way you like it, and just enjoy those beef ribs. Beef ribs are amazing. Now in regard to beef ribs, there's a lot of different ways to cook them, but there's a few things that don't change. Now right from the top, they have that membrane. It requires a really sharp pokey knife, something with a sharp tip on it that you can get up under that membrane, be able to cut it off. You don't want to trim too much meat off, so the sharper your knife, the less meat you're going to trim off, and the more of the membrane you're going to be able to get just right. The next thing you need is a good set and a good variety of good spices. You want to pick spices that are really nice and well balanced. Now for me today, that is a nice little variety of Fiesta spices. They're very traditional, they're very cultural down here in Texas, and they're some of our all-time favorites down here in the area where I'm from. It's also what I call the familiar flavor. It's something that everybody's used to using down here, so if I want to impress my family and friends, I'm going to use something that is familiar to them, that they're going to enjoy. So that's what we're going to be using today. Now each of the 4 ribs are layered a little bit differently, because I like little different flavors on each one, but that's what we're running today. Now, depending on which ribs you're going to be cooking, you're going to need a really good smoker or a really good grill. Now I'm set to jag because I got both in one. I've got a smoker and a grill with my Hasty-Bake Legacy 132 and my 131. These little grills are a do-all grill. I can cook low and slow. I can cook hot and fast. I can actually cook a little bit of both at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and get our cooking process started, and we're going to be on our way to cooking and eating some really good ribs today. All right, it's time to put the meat on the grill. We're running 2 Hasty-Bake Legacies. We have a 132 on this side. It's going to be running a little bit hotter, and then we have the 131 on this side. It's going to run a little bit slower. So we're going to get the thinner meats on the hot and fast, and then we're going to get the thicker meats on the lower and slightly slower. We're going to put the finger ribs over here at the end. They're going to cook a little slower than the others. We're going to put our beef navel next to that. This is a very thin cut, so we don't want it too hot. After the fire sells, I like to get a good sear on my little loaded ribs and on the navel. Puts a really nice little bark on there, a nice little char. Really makes them delicious. All right, we're gonna close this down. It's been running right around 400, 420 right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lower the grate down a little bit, bring my temperature down to about 350, 300. That's where I like to cook. All right, on our 131 Hasty-Bake, we're gonna run about 300, and we're gonna cook our big monster ribs over here and our short ribs also. I love to hear that sizzle, and I love to cook these big pieces of meat indirect. Low, not low and slow, but indirect. Indirect, when you're cooking indirect, you have the fire on one side of the grill and your meat on the other side of the grill. That allows the meat to take on a little more smoke, a little more smoky flavor, and you're not grilling actually directly over the coals. Now at some point halfway through the cook, I am going to put them over the coals, just again for that added char and a little extra flavor that I love and that I grew up with here in South Texas. We're catching a little fire here. Let me go ahead and shut this down and let the Hasty-Bakes do what they do best, cook great barbecue. Oh man, they're getting a nice char. Getting it really quick too. All right, we're gonna have to slow this down just a little bit. It's a little bit hot for that thin beef bacon. And so it's gonna slow down a little bit in a little while. And we're gonna be eating some really good beef bacon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move these big finger ribs over this way and get these a little further away from the fire. Let them cook a little bit longer, unwrap. I like to wrap them to keep some of the moisture in there, and they'll cook a little quicker also when you have them wrapped in foil. And then that way I can let them rest, and while they're resting, they're gonna redistribute their juices. The moisture's gonna kind of rehydrate back into the ribs. So you're gonna maximize your flavor when you let them rest in the foil for a little while, because there's juice and there's moisture in there and it absorbs back into your meats. They're probably gonna need about another 30 minutes on the grill here. They'll be done, they'll be ready for eating time. The short ribs are looking nice and pretty, really nice color. We're gonna go ahead and rotate these. We're actually gonna get them a little closer to the fire so they can cook a little bit quicker. Rotate them. And we're actually gonna put the monster ribs right over the coals for a little while. Fire's not too hot, it's running about 275, so we're good with that. They can sit there for about 5-10 minutes, and we're gonna go ahead and put them back in direct. You can really see the pretty color on these big monster ribs. Look how moist and juicy they are. And you can see all the little flakes from the Uncle Chris steak seasoning. That is a really, really good flavor. It has all the right herbs for beef to make it taste wonderful. I usually just wrap by color, but today, just out of curiosity, I'm gonna take my Thermapen and just kind of see where we're at. It has the color I like, and I can see that the bones pull back quite a bit. So we're gonna check. We're looking at 182, 83 degrees, right about the center there. So I would definitely say they're ready to wrap. All right, now before I wrap, I'm gonna raise the grate up a little bit and give them a nice little char. I love a nice little char on my beef ribs. Really adds another really great element of flavor. I just gotta take a little taste. Just kind of want to see where I'm at. I call it quality control. Oh yeah. All right, barbecue lovers. Great day cooking barbecue. We made some monster ribs, some little ribs, all kinds of beef ribs. Just really great barbecue on our Hasty-Bake Charcoal Grill. Another cool thing about beef ribs, and the reason you never get tired of them, is because they come from different parts of the animal, different sections of the animal. And so each rib has actually a little bit of a distinctive flavor. So they all have their little nuances, their different tastes, kind of like steaks. You know, ribeye doesn't taste like a sirloin. Sirloin doesn't taste like a filet mignon. They all have their little different tastes and their tenderness characteristics, but they're all wonderful. Same thing with beef ribs. All right, barbecue lovers, that about wraps it up. If you like this video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Do share it with a friend that's a barbecue lover like you and I. And remember to keep the smoke light, make it work.